Hi, and welcome to Designing Web Pages with HTML. Today we're going to talk about the basics of creating a web page using the markup language HTML. What we're not going to do is we're not going to learn how to publish a website to the internet. That involves working with online companies and reserving the space for yourself. We're going to work locally on your own computer at home and create something that you could then later on use. Many of you that might have a little bit of experience with this or might have shopped around may know that most website hosting companies will offer packages that put things together for you or that automate this process. However, it's still important to know how the backbones of these things work because it allows you to go in and make changes and edits and create objects that fit what you're looking to have for your own personal or business website. So I'm going to go over the basics of constructing content for your web page, how to create tags, how to edit them, change their properties, and go over a lot of different options that are available to us. Before we get started, I do want to show you some of the resources that we've made available for this class. If you go to the library's webpage at mybpl.org and then go to Services, Computers, Computer Classes, and then look under Classes and Materials, you'll see the Designing Web Pages with HTML handout that I'm using as a reference and that I'll be working with you today. And then you see a color references page that will have numeric values for different colors, as we see as it comes up here, that we'll be able to use in several of the attributes and tags that we put together. So keep an eye out for these things. We'll be using both of these today. Now with that, I want to talk about how we're going to use this and how we're going to create things. What you need to work through this today is any kind of a text editor. That means someplace where you can type basic text in. Now, if you have more elaborate programs like Microsoft Word, that's perfectly fine. You can use those. However, I recommend starting out with things that are a little simpler, like, for example, Notepad, because Microsoft Word will often automatically put things in that you may or may not want. If this is something that you've invested some money in and you have website development programs, you're welcome to use those as well. But if you want to just keep it very basic, start out with Notepad, or if you want something a little bit fancier, there is a free download called Notepad++ that you can use to work on creating the HTML. So we're going to use that to create the files, and then we are going to use any web browser, whichever one you like, whether it's Firefox, Chrome, whatever you want to use, to view the files that you create. And we're going to keep going back and forth between the two. So we will create the file in one window, and then we will look at it in another. This will all be done locally on your computer. Nothing is going to be done on the internet yet. Although once you have created these files, if you had a location online, you could post it there and people would be able to view it. With that, I'm going to open up Notepad on my computer. And then we can get started. Okay, so we're ready to begin creating something for a web page. And before we do, I just want to talk briefly about how we design these web pages at a very simple level to get started with it, and we'll add more and more complexity as we go. Now, if you've heard of HTML referred to before, what that stands for is Hypertext Markup Language. The two things that I want to concentrate on with this are the text, which is going to be the content that we're typing in, and the markup, which is something that affects the text and changes its appearance or how it behaves when the website is being read by a browser. The browsers, again, being Chrome, Firefox, whatever. So we're going to go through and we're going to put in some text and we're going to put these markup tags around it that will create an effect on the website. Now, in doing that, we want to have something of a structure to what we do with this. At the top, we're going to have the header for the website. Now, people are often confused when we're creating the header, and they think that you're creating the top of the web page, the first thing that you see when you look at a website. That's not the case. In the header, you're going to have information that contributes to how the entire website works. When we get more advanced, these will be things like bits of PHP code that allow you to have forms and interactive components to your website, or style sheets that control the appearance for the entire thing. But we're just getting started right now, so we'll start out with a very simple header. We just put in a title and have that appear at the top of our website. This, again, is not the content that we see in the big square that makes up the website. This is just stuff that makes it work in the background. After that, we have the body. This is where all the content of your website will go. There are different ways to style your websites. There are different techniques out there. I'll talk a little bit about some options that we have, but again, we're starting with some basic options today, and we're going to start out just having the header, then the body, and then at the end we'll have the footer, which is where you would have, typically you'll have a consistent set of links that go across a number of pages. You might have quick reference information like directions, phone number, contact information, things like that. Just consistent objects that are at the bottom of every page in your entire website. We're going to be focusing mostly on the body today, so that's what we're going to work on the most. Now, I am going to type along as I describe these things, and as I enter this in, one of the key things that you'll notice is whenever I put in a tag, not every time, but the vast majority of the time, there's going to be an opening and a closing tag. And all of the content that's affected by it, the text that we are marking up, will be in between those two. You'll see examples of this as we go through quite a bit. If you like to follow along in the handout, when you get to page 4, we start to have a lot of the tags listed, and a number of them will be there. So I'm going to enter in a couple of basic ones here just to get us started, and then we will open up the website to see what we have. So I start out the less than sign, HTML, greater than. That is telling the website that this is currently HTML code. When you get more advanced, there are other kinds of code that you can type in. We're starting out with the basics. Then I am going to go down a few lines and close the HTML. So in between these two, the website reading this file will know that it is all HTML. You can always add more lines in between these things as we go. I'm going to then put in a header. It's the head tag. And in between these, I'm going to put in a title, my first web page. Notice how I begin and close each one of these tags. So they're kind of like parentheses, and all the stuff goes in the middle of them. Now, I need to save this file so that we can view it somewhere. Right now, we haven't actually created anything yet because we haven't saved it. So I'm going to go to File, Save As, and I'm going to call this example.htm. Couple of key things. You can name these whatever you like. Whenever possible, I'd recommend having no spaces in your name so it's easier to reference when you create links to other web pages. We'll talk about that later on. And then the 3-letter extension at the end can be HTM or HTML. It doesn't matter. It will ignore whatever 4th letter you type in, but you want to be consistent so that it will work with any links you come in and there's no confusion with other pages that you make. So once I've done that, I'm going to click Save, and then we've created our first file. Now that we've created that file, let's take a look at it. To do this, we'd go to whatever folder you saved this file in. So if you saved it in your documents library, then you would go there. If you saved it to your desktop, you just take a look at the desktop. I happen to have saved mine in my downloads folder, so I'll open that up. And you will see the file, whatever you named it, listed right there. And you'll generally see it with whatever icon is the default browser for your computer. So if you wanted to just open it up with the default, you'd simply double click on it, as I will do in just a moment. If you wanted to open it with something else, you would right click on it and choose Open With, and then choose whatever browser was appropriate. But I'm just going to double click on that. And this opened up in Microsoft Edge. Now you might be looking at the screen and saying, okay, when's it going to open? Why is it just sitting here at a blank white screen? If I look back at the notepad, didn't I type in a title? And I did. And you see that title in the tab at the top. Remember, the header is not the content in the body of the page. We're going to get to that in just a second. The header is the content that makes up the structure of the website, and one of the things that that has is the title that appears in the tab of every page. You've probably never noticed these too much. They're just sort of there. But if you go to any website, if you look at your tab, you'll see a title describing what it is that you're looking at. That was put in there by somebody who created this. So now that we have that in place, we're going to add some more content to this. The next tag that I'm going to do is I'm going to add in the body tag. So underneath the closed head tag here, I'm going to put in body, and then I'll go down to the bottom here and close the body tag. So this will be the entire body of our website. This will be all the content that we put in here. Some of you who have a little experience with this, you might be familiar with working with the idea of divs instead of the body. and that's perfectly fine. That gives you some more flexibility and some more advanced things you can do. Right now, again, we're keeping it pretty simple, and I want to show you some of the attributes that you can add to the body tag in just a few minutes. But if you like working the other way, that's perfectly fine. Now, inside of the body tag, I want to put some content, so I'm going to put in a paragraph. Again, some of you who might have experimented on your own, you might know you could just type something in here and it would appear. And absolutely that works fine. But it gets to be a little bit messy. Generally speaking, we try to be as neat and orderly with these things as we can, because websites will grow and sprawl and have a lot of content in them. And so if you can keep things divided up in sections, whether it's with those divs or with paragraph tags, it can make it a lot easier to find things. Also, putting things within these paragraph tags instead of just typing them in the body makes it a lot easier to structure the spacing and the layout. So I'm going to put in a paragraph tag here and type hello world, as is the traditional first thing to type in a new language, and then I will close the paragraph tag. Once I've done that, I'm going to save. Now, I saved my work, but still I don't see anything over here. And the reason for that is, just like a normal website, if it's not loading up the newest information, you need to click refresh. This is something we used to have to do a lot more with older websites. Nowadays, most websites that are time dependent will refresh themselves, but obviously this is a pretty simple one we're making here. So if you want to see your changes, you click refresh, and there's hello world. You can go back to Notepad. So I've created some content here, and if I put in a second paragraph, I put in some more content, and I'll close that tag. Now I'm going to save here again, and refresh. And you see, not only did that appear, but you see a little bit of spacing in between. That's because of the paragraph tags. If I hadn't had that, it would have just been one continuous run-on. One more key thing that I want to show you, as I'm typing here, notice on Notepad I pressed enter and typed I hope you like my page. Over here that just strung on as we go. Web pages don't recognize white space. They recognize individual spaces in between words, but if I put in a whole lot of spaces, or if you press the enter key, that has no effect on the appearance. You see no change there, I didn't see the spaces appear. So we need to learn tags that we can put in to control this and to move our text around. And this is one of the trickiest parts of making web pages, is getting the layout just right. And you'll experiment with this and be frustrated with it at times, but I'm going to show you some of the basics of that next as we explore some of the more tags that we can add. So let's talk about some of the tags that we can use to change the appearance of our text on a website. First off, I'm going to make my hello world here look like more of a welcome. I will put in a alignment tag, center. By the way, later on in the handout I'll talk about places we can go to see references for all these tags that are available and learn more details about how to use them. But for right now, I just want to show you examples of how this works. So I put in the center tag inside of the brackets, and then when I was done with it, I closed that. I will now save and refresh, and there we go. And notice a key thing with this. You never know what somebody's going to be using to view your website. It might be a mobile device, it might be a laptop with a smaller screen, it might be a desktop with a larger screen. So it doesn't specify exactly how wide it will go. The centering changes as you move the tab around, whereas the left alignment, which is the standard, stays the same. Now I can also put in the strong tag, and you see how that makes it a little thicker, a little darker, sort of a bold effect that we could have. Now going back to our paragraph that we have typed in here, a couple of things that I want to mention. If you want to have a page break but you don't want to leave the paragraph, if you just want to have the equivalent of pressing enter, we have the BR tag. This is one of the rare tags that does not have opening and closing brackets. It just by itself creates a line break. And so when I save that, I come here, I can refresh, and oh, that jumped down to the next line. You notice that that's not as spacious as the space between the paragraphs. This is something that can be adjusted with style sheets when you become more advanced, but by default, the paragraph tags will have in between them a little bit of blank space that you can see here, but the BR tag will be a tight enter key jumping down to the next line with zero space in between the blank line. Similar to that tag is the HR tag, which if I save that and refresh, you see that creates a separation line. This can be good not just for text that you want to break up, but if you have rows of images, perhaps you're doing a gallery of your artwork or your professional work that you may have done before, and you want to have things divided out into different sections, the HR tag can be very useful. It's not really appropriate in the middle of the paragraph here, so I'm going to go back and change that to BR, and notice every time I make a change, I am saving it and then refreshing so I can see it. If you become more confident in your changes, you can make several of them between saves and refreshes, but if you want to check on how things are going, especially early on, that can be a handy thing to do. Other tags similar to the strong tag there, we can put in EM for emphasis. This is similar to italics. When I save this and we refresh over here, see how the word lots changed right there. And we can use a little bit more complicated one called the font tag. Let me pick out a section here. So this is our next step with tags, because within this we have attributes that we can change. So just saying font doesn't make any change here. If I save this and come back to here and refresh, nothing new, no change happened. But within this font tag, I can put some more information. Now you'll notice I'm going to put the information just within the font tag here, and I won't have to put it again at the closing because the closing takes care of the entire tag. But I'm going to put in size equals, and now here we have two choices. You can type in a static number, which will be a fixed size, or you can do something relative. I recommend doing something relative because that way it'll work no matter what people have the settings for their own computer. So I do size equals, say, +2. I save this, I come back here, notice that got a little bit bigger. This is now proportionally bigger to this. Another attribute people frequently like to change about the font is the color. So inside of the font tag again, I can type color equals, and here I have a choice. Certain basic colors like red, blue, yellow, green, you can simply type the name within quotation marks. And then if I save here and refresh, you see that changed it to red. However, if I want to have more fine control and I want to use, say, that color chart that I had here or any other color creation tool that you have, you can choose instead to put in a number, and then you would use one of these hexadecimal numbers that are available. Hexadecimals go anywhere from 0 to F. So it goes 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, A, B, C, D, E, F, and we have 6 different places for those. This controls the amount of red, green, and blue inside of your font color, or whatever background color, or wherever you are using this color. And you can see examples here to work off of, and you could grab whichever one you wanted. I will just take this one here, 6600FF. 6600FF. And I will save the changes. And then when I look at my page, now it's that shade of blue. And you can tinker with these all you like. I could say, oh, well, what if that was an A? Still there, just a slightly little bit more purple. So with that, it allows you a little bit more fine control. But if you wanted to just make a quick, easy change and not have to think about it, you could simply type in a name for that. One last attribute that some people change here is they will put in a style type. This would be a font style similar to what you would change if you're using a word processor. At the beginning, I would recommend against doing this because you are then beholden on what people have enabled on their browser to control how your font looks when it goes through here. When you get more advanced and you start creating style sheets, you will put in what they call group or families of fonts, where there'll be a series of choices. So if the first one doesn't work on the computer that is viewing it on, it'll go to the next font option and so on down, making it easier to find something that fits the appearance you're trying to go with here. But if I were to change the style for this font and it did not work properly on somebody else's computer, very often that changes the whole appearance of the website because it grabs whatever is available and it's a little bit riskier. So I'd recommend against that. While we're talking about attributes, you can do the same thing for the body of the page. I could put in here attributes like, say, the text color. Now put in a different number with this. Save that, and when I refresh, now you see that color appeared for most of the text, but not for the one that I already had the font, because the last change you made is the one that sticks. So this is for the entire body of the page. I have put that change in, but this last little bit here where I put the font tag around it, it just changed this. You can also put in things like link appearances, and you can put in whatever you wanted for that. We'll create a link in just a minute. Most of you that are familiar with browsing web pages, you might know that links are very often a bluish color to let you know that if you click on that, it'll take you to another page. This is where you would control this. So I could go over to my color chart and say, oh, that's the color that I want for my links. I want them to be 0000FF. Essentially all blue. And then you have the V-link, which is a visited link. Again, those of you that have been to a lot of web pages, you might see the standard for this is that after you click a link, if you go back to the page where you click that link from, the link now appears to be purplish. So I could look down here and say, that looks about right for a visited link. So 9933FF. And now in just a moment when we create some links on this page, we'll be able to see that effect. One last attribute that I want to mention for the body is creating a background color. For this, in addition to the text, link, and V-link, you can toss in BG color and give it whatever number you like. It has to, again, be a 6-digit hexadecimal, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 works. And when I save that, and I come over here and refresh it, I can say, oh, it's a little bit dark, and I might want to go and check my color palette here and say, maybe I just want something a little brighter. Now I say, okay, that's a little bit more readable, and you can tinker with that and play around with it however you like. This is useful not just for changing the background for your entire website, but when you get to the point where you're creating more divisions within the website, you can have different background colors for those sections too, if need be. Now, you'll see in the handout that in addition to the background color option, you can have a background image where you would type background equals, and then you would give it a file path to go to have a image appear as the background for your website. This is generally not recommended. The image will repeat itself to fill in as much space as is necessary, and that can be distracting and take away from the content that you're putting in the website. But it is an option that you have if you had a logo or something else that you wanted to have repeating in the background. You can give that a try. Now, putting in the path to the image is a little tricky, and we're going to get to that in just a second when we talk about adding in image tags to your website. But that's something that I would generally recommend against in most situations. I'll put back in the color number here, and I'll do the rather plain light yellowish. Now, I want to talk briefly about creating a link. We've talked about how to change the appearance of those, but if you're not familiar, a link is a part of a website that connects you from your website or your web page to another page. I made the correction there and I specified that it can be from page to page, not just from website to website, because within your own website you probably have a number of pages. Maybe you have a contacts page, maybe you have a pricing page, maybe you have a history of your company or about us for the organization. Whatever it may be, you have a lot of pages within the site that you can jump around with using links. And then if you wanted to link to an external source, you can do that as well. So when you're creating a link, you need to decide what part of the website you want to link to something else. Say I wanted my little greeting here at the beginning where it says Hello World to link to the library's webpage. I would put my link tag around this. That's the letter A is an anchor. That is something that we're going to create repeatedly in our websites. And the href stands for the hyperlink, which is that address at the top of a website, reference. So this is what page are we going to? Now, when you've gone to a browser and you just type in a website, maybe you type in mybpl.org and it takes you right to the library's website. But when you put a link in, you need to be exact with it. You need to type it in completely correctly with all the details there. So if you have any questions about that or you're having issues with it, I recommend you go to the website that you want to visit, copy it, and then paste the link into your tag so you're less likely to make a mistake. What I mean by that is I would go to mybpl.org, and then once it goes there, I could copy the address, go over to here, and paste it in. But I've already typed that in, so it should be okay. Now once I've done that, and I save my changes, when I refresh, now that looks blue because that is the color for a link. And when I click on it, it takes me to the library webpage. Then when I go back, it looks purplish because again, I changed those in the body tags right there. We're going to go over in just a moment how to create lists and how to insert images, and all of those things can be done with links. Anything that you have in your website, if you simply put this ahref tag around it and the closing tag after it, that will become a link. So we can use this again and again. So with that, let's talk about putting images into our document. So we're going to use the image tag here. I'm putting this right now underneath the last paragraph that I typed. If I wanted, I could include that as part of another paragraph here. If I wanted to have other content around it. And inside the img tag for image, we have a lot of attributes we have to put in to make it work. The most important one is the source. This is where is this image coming from. Now this will be trickier when you are creating your own website and you have to upload a lot of files to that website to make sure that you have everything that you need. But for today's example, what I did is I saved a couple of images in the same folder that I am storing this web page that I am making right here. And that's really key, because if they're not in the same folder, then you need to give it a very specific path to get there. So you need to make sure that it knows how to find this file. That's something I talk a little bit more about in the Creating a Website class, because file management and understanding where everything goes as part of your collective website is a bigger deal with that than it is just a basic page. But I'm going to put in a source here. So I type src, that's the attribute name for source, and I'm going to put in the file name. Now, if I go over to my downloads folder, I downloaded a file called Access. It's important, again, to get the names exactly right. It will not be able to guess what you meant or what you intended to type. And so if you don't know what the extension is, the little 3 letters that appear after the ... you can right-click on any file and check Properties, and that'll tell me that it's a .jpg file right there. So I can say the source equals access.jpg. The only reason the source is so simple is because these are in the same folder. When you have an actual website, it's going to be a little bit more complicated. As I said, a little bit beyond today's class, but something we'll come back to. I'll now close this. I'm going to come back to here, and we're going to edit this some more. But first I'm going to close that. And I'm going to save. Now I come over here and I refresh. And up, there is a slide taking us to some information about the access class. And I'll go back here and I'm going to put in another image, source equals, and this is another thing that I typed in. And I refresh. And oh, look at that. Little empty square. What that means is that you got something wrong. It's referring to a file that it can't find. You've probably seen this on web pages before. You go to a web page and you're expecting to see a welcome screen, but you just see this little square instead, or there's supposed to be an advertisement on the side and you see that. That means that it's not finding the file. Very often you refresh and it's taken care of, but when you're designing it yourself and you see that, that indicates that maybe you missed something. And so I'll go take a look here, and I'll scroll down a bit, and I will see the file that I made. And up, it's not puppy, it's pups. So I go here and I change that to pups, save, and refresh, and oh, there's the pups. Now, a couple things that happened here. Before, you noticed that the image was to the right of this. That's because if you don't put in a page break, it doesn't care about the blank line that was typed in there. It just wants to stick it off to the right. The only reason it went down this time is because the image is rather large, and so it wrapped around to the next page. So the next attribute that I want to show you is if I put in here width equals, and I'm going to put in a pixel size for the width. If you haven't heard the word pixel before, it refers to the number of dots on the computer screen. So this is sort of a computer's way of measuring things. If you're wondering how many pixels equals an inch, well, that depends on the screen you're looking at. I usually tell people, play around with it, adjust the sizes, and you'll get a feel for what looks good. So say I put in 300, and I save this, and then refresh. Oh, there it goes. And maybe that's a little too small, so I go back here and I change it to 500. And I refresh. And now that looks better. Notice I was only changing the width. The height stayed proportional. I could change the height as well if I wanted to, but I recommend against changing more than one because you tend to distort things if you don't have them the exact right proportions. So just change one of the size dimensions. Now let's combine the images with something that we learned and create a link. I'm taking the address for going to that access class and putting that around. So you see here's the A tag with the H reference to the web page that goes to. And then I close it at the end there. And I put that around the access image. So then when I save that and we come here, it doesn't look any different, but now when I put my mouse over the access image, I get that hand with one finger pointing that lets me know that it's a link, and I click and it takes me to the page. Whereas this image is not a link, so I can click on it all day and it doesn't go anywhere. Next thing that I want to show you how to create is what's called a list. This is something that we use a lot with web pages. Whenever you have a series of links or documents that you want to share or images you want to display, we have a lot of listing items that we can do if you're posting for job requirements or items that you're looking to have brought into your organization, things that you sell. It can be very helpful. There are two different kinds of lists. There are ordered lists, which are things that count, 1, 2, 3, A, B, C, etc., and unordered lists, which are bullet points. To create one of these, you would first do the overall tag. So I'll start out with an unordered list. So I do UL for unordered list, and then I close the UL. And then inside of this, we have individual tags for each list item. So that's the LI. So this is a little bit different from things we've done before in that it has both the overall both the overall list tag and then the individual list item. So I say list item here, 5 years experience, close list item, good customer service, close list item, third example. And after I've done that, when I save this and I refresh here, you see my bullet point lists. And the reason they're that color is because that goes back to the text change that we had made up here at the top. We might have forgotten about it with all the other things we put in, but that's where the effect came from there. If I change this unordered list, that's the UL, to an ordered list, that's OL, save, and refresh there, all of a sudden it's 1, 2, 3 instead of ... So they're not too complicated to make once you understand the idea of having the first bracket and then the smaller brackets inside of them, but this can be a very helpful and straightforward way to have a lot of information on your website. A couple of other things that I want to mention. I do have some details in your handout about how to create sounds. I put that in there because a lot of people ask about it when I teach this class in person. It's not something that I recommend. If you spend a lot of time traveling the web, when you open up web pages that automatically play sounds, most of the time people don't like that. It's something that's gone very much out of fashion in recent years. You still see it now and then, but it's rarely welcomed, and it slows down the amount that the page loads, and it very often won't work on mobile devices, so it's asking for trouble to add those in. If it is absolutely essential to your website, I do have the text that you would use to type that in to make that happen, but I'd recommend against using it. And then the final tag that I want to do an example of is I want to talk about tables. Before I show you how to actually create a table, though, I want to give you an idea of what it's for. Now, tables are something that are considered a basic way to control the layout of your page. But so far, all we've done is just a continuous sort of scroll of adding things as we go forever on down. We haven't put a lot of structure to this web page yet. And if you've seen many web pages, you know usually there's a layout and structure that is a lot more than just this kind of endless blog. Tables are a basic way to do that. It's not the most advanced option out there. It's not the most popular style choice that you would use right now. But as a next step for learning about things, tables can be a useful tool. And so I do want to show you how that works, and I'm going to create a basic table with you here today. Just to understand that this is not the last step for creating a page, it's just a next step for making things a little bit more complex. With all those warnings being said, let's go ahead and create a basic table. So for the table tag, I'm going to start out creating that, and then we're going to come back and change some attributes. The way the tables work is you are setting up a structure to fit your content into. And inside of this, you have first the number of table rows, so that's the number of items going across. Sorry, the number of rows, if you think of rows in a movie theater, so how many rows high there are there, and then within each row, you break them up into the table dimensions, the TD, and those will be how many segments each row is. Important things to know, you can't have, for one row, 3 segments, and then another row underneath it 2. It needs to be consistent row to row. There are workarounds for that. You can do things where in between the rows you have nested tables and you divide those up further. That's getting a little bit complex and hard to explain over a video here, but there are tricks that you can use to avoid these problems. But to keep it basic, I'm going to create a table row here, and then I close the table row. Notice how I always, whenever I open a tag, I close it right away so I don't forget to. Because when you get lost in all of this code, this is small so far, but these can be thousands of lines long, it can be easy to miss details here and there. And then I create table depth and table depth. And oh, I missed the closing mark there. And I'm going to do 3 of them for this. And within these, I'm going to put some of the content that we've already created here. So I'm going to take this image that we tossed in and put that within one section of my table. Just so it's easier to read, I'm breaking these up. But these 3 different TDs that I have here. I moved them down to different rows for ease of reading, for those of us that are looking together on the screen. But these are all going to be lined up, and you'll see that in a second. So this was the access link that I created with that image that is now in the first section. In the second section, I'm going to toss in that list that I made. And then in the third section, I'm going to put in my puppy's picture. And let's take a look at how that came out. I save it, and then I refresh. Now, you see we have 3 different sections here. One with this link to the axis image, the second one with the text tossed in, and the third one with the next image. These things have all fitted themselves however they liked because I did not put any structure in it. But if I go back and I put a fixed width for each of these, I can set the width to be either a percentage of what's available or a fixed amount of space. So I can make this 40%. This one 20%. And this one 40%. And now it should divide them proportionally. I'm also going to put in a border so I can see the structure that we've created here. And I'm going to set this table to be the entire width of my browser. So now you can see the border going around there, and you see how these are sized with each other. And if I make it bigger or smaller, it squeezes down until it runs out of room. There are a lot more attributes, a lot more things you can put in the tables. What we're doing with this is we're creating a controlled fixed space. Instead of it being percentages based on this, I could change it to actual widths of numbers of pixels, and then it would be exactly the size that I wanted. So if you wanted to keep your website looking exactly the same no matter who's using it, the tables can be a good way to do that. It's not as dynamic and flowing as some websites are and as you might want them to be, but if you're getting started and you just want it to look right, it can be a basic way to begin with that. We'll take a look at some more options with the tables in just a moment, but I want to make sure that everybody takes a look at what we're doing there and knows what we've done so far. We've created one row with 3 different sections. So if I wanted to make my table more complicated, I could do an entire second row and I could put in three more table dimensions here. That's 1. And these again could be anything. These could be images, these could be links to documents, these could just be text that I wanted to have broken up into different sections. Once you've seen these and you get the idea for how the structure works, as you start browsing around the web, you're going to start seeing tables in places. You're going to see contact forms that people have, and you'll realize like, oh, that's divided up into a table where they have the person's name in the first column, and then they have their phone number, and then they have the email address next to it, and they use that structure over and over again as you go through it. As I refresh here, and you can see, yep, there's test 1, 2, and 3. And you see the height is just proportional to the content that's in there, but the width is set to match with the row above it. And so this is, again, a relatively basic way of controlling the layout. There are limitations to it. It's not the prettiest of the options that are out there, but it's something that you can learn, you can get started with, and you can go from there. Now, a couple last things that I want to talk about. I do want to mention scripts. This is something that I talk more about in the Creating a Website class, but a script is something that you would put in to include something that is beyond HTML in your HTML web page. So if you wanted to use a programming language like JavaScript or PHP, those would be next level things that you could learn. You can do that, and you could include those scripts in there. If you wanted to include a style sheet, you could do that, and that is a similar structure to putting in the script, and you'd have the CSS style sheet that would control the appearance of your entire page. You could use that same file throughout numbers of different web pages you use to make your whole website look consistent. So I have a little bit of information in the handout for this about scripts just to introduce you to it. In my classes, I always like to kind of show what's coming next. But the last thing that I want to talk about is the learning process. How you want to learn more about these things. The first thing that I'm going to tell you, having taught these classes in person a number of times, is typos are going to be your problem more than anything else. I maintain the library's website along with people that work along with me and for me to do that, and when we're putting them together and we have problems, sometimes it's complex and it's technical. More often than not, somebody missed one of these low closing tags, or somebody didn't have that in right, or missed a quotation mark. Little mistakes can make it break. They can make things not work. So if something stopped working, you learn to follow up and to check as to where that might have been typed in wrong. Make sure you get the names exactly right. Make sure you get the punctuation exactly right. All of those details matter. Web pages are not good at guessing what we meant. They only know how to do what we said. The other thing that I would recommend is I have a number of websites that have tutorials and lists of tags or tools that you can use to try them out built into them. I have those on the document that's on our website, so please go there, download that, and follow some of those links. The W3 schools is a personal favorite of mine. I do not have any association with these, and neither does the Bloomingdale Public Library. They're just ones that I've used as teaching tools in the past. They are all free to use. If you want to learn some more elaborate things through our website, we do have, I can go there now. If you go to Learn, Online Courses, if you have a library card at the Bloomingdale Public Library, you can go to lynda.com, and there are a number of HTML classes there as well. And the last thing that I'd recommend to you is when you're viewing a web page, particularly a simple web page, if you right-click on any website, you should be able to view the page source. And that will show you all of the HTML. Now you can see these websites can be kind of complicated, but sometimes you look through and you'll find, oh, museum passes. And you'll be able to go back to the website and find something that matches up with that, or Board of Trustees. And you might link through here and you might find in the website Board of Trustees. And you can start putting two and two together. And so that can be a great resource. I'd encourage you to play around, make some of these on your own, throw a lot of content together, and have fun with it. If you have any questions about this, please feel free to contact us at the library. Thank you very much, and have a great day.